Monday, and we're back. On the 17th of June, we've got the heat advisories and excessive heat watches up for much of the Northeast back into the Ohio Valley and lower Great Lakes. Flood watches up for the Northern Plains and also for the Texas coast. Why? Well, for the Texas coast, it's because of a potential tropical cyclone. And why not have winter storm warnings up in the mountains of Montana and Idaho, even if it is the middle of June? We're open to all possibilities here tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, which is brought to you by Tempest by WeatherFlow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is on the description to this podcast. So if you use the coupon code SPRING 2024, if you make a purchase, you will get. All right, hold on, Joe, because I'm having issues. Just a second. Okay, I think you should be all right now.
Hello.
Yes, this is
10%.
because 10%. Thank you. I was in tech hell for a good part of today. It started this morning with another one of those infamous Microsoft updates that changes all the settings. So I had to get through that. And then the website crashed because the server crashed. I had to get through all that. And then a few other things happened, but this was the last of the bunch. So everything, as I said off before we started the show, everything is fixable, uh, except death and taxes. But you can sort of deal with the taxes part if you have a good accountant. All right, welcome to everybody on the chat board tonight. And with those of you watching in the background, welcome to tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. As we had the weekend off, make sure if you're new to the channel, subscribe to my YouTube channel and turn on your notifications so you don't miss us. Because we're on Sunday through Thursdays at 7:35 and the occasional Friday and Saturday, like we were on last Friday for severe weather. We'll always let you know about it. And then we'll usually move the schedule around a little bit so that Joe and I can get 2 days back to back. And if you like the show, hit the like button because we love to be liked. So, anyhow, by the way, have you hit 90 degrees yet?
I don't think so.
Okay,
I
because
don't. I don't recall hitting 90. I mean, it's been hot on a few days. It was hot in April, but I don't think we hit 90 degrees yet.
okay, I hit 90 on Saturday here in the mountains. So I must have been about 93 or 4 in town. But you're going to be burning up for the next 6 days. I'm not going to be really all that bad here because I'm on the bottom of that ridge. So I'm getting easterly winds from the upper atmosphere and also in the lower atmosphere getting east and northeast winds. And actually only got to 85 today here, which was nice. And probably going to be, I was looking at some of the thing on my Tempest weather flow, the forecast that it had up. I think it only has like upper 70s for here for Wednesday, which will be pretty interesting to see. But you got a heat wave starting. We've got a potential tropical cyclone in the southwest Gulf of Mexico. We're going to talk about that, and we've got all sorts of other things going on.
Yes, it's going to be pretty hot out there for the next several days. I honestly don't think we're going to get too high. In other words, I don't think we're going to be flirting with the triple digits, at least locally here in the lower Hudson Valley. Although by the end of the week, we might be talking about 96, 97, if that's hot enough for you. But
Right.
it's
Well, if the position of the ridge verifies uh, at its strongest point when it's across New York State and New England, you might actually see higher temperatures the further north you go than you would to the south.
right. Right. You might
So,
actually see in upstate New York hotter than down here in the tri-state New York area.
and and,
Yeah.
and part of the reason is that because Frank Lysandra, who's on the board sometimes and watches the show, had sent me a message because he didn't quite understand why they had forecast higher amounts in places up in Massachusetts than they had down in southwest Connecticut. And the reason for that is when you look at where the upper high is and the surface high is up in New England and in upstate New York, they're going to see a west wind, and as opposed to downstate and then point south where the wind is probably going to be more southwest, or in the case of tomorrow, more south southwest, and that's going to hold the temperatures down. The ridge is actually too far north. And the other funny thing about all of this, Joe, is that it just really boggled my mind last week how uh, everybody was going sort of ape crazy over the European with the upper high. When you look at the forecast temperatures, I mean, they had numbers that were just ridiculous, like 108, 110. These were for air temperatures, 108, 109. There's something about the European model that loves to do that, and we see it in the wintertime in the other direction where it goes berserk with the low zero readings. That as we come into the short range, everything seems to get a little saner.
Yeah, sometimes you have to take these super extremes with a grain of salt. But yeah, these those the European. I don't know. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that you know the European is now also the AI European. They've tinkered with the algorithms and got stuff mixed up or messed up or whatever. I don't know. I
Well,
really don't.
the operational European run is done, and that's actually one of the ensemble members that they use, or one of the control members. I forget which one, as the quote operational run. So we have that. And they said that they were going to take some of the computing power away because from the operational, which is why they got rid of it, because they wanted to put more computer power into the ensembles and into this AI version. So, bottom line is, when you see ridiculous numbers like that, uh, there's a fairly high likelihood that they're going to be way off.
Way, way off.
Right. All right, I'll let you decide. What do we start first? Do we start with the potential tropical cyclone? Do we start with what's going on now? Do we?
Now,
Yep.
I find it interesting. Tonight we were watching the ABC network news, and of course they talked about the heat dome. That's the new that by the way, that's the new branding.
I
Now
know.
we atmospheric river, and we've had polar vortex. Now the
Now,
new that the media has fallen in love with is heat dome,
right,
and whenever we have spells of unusually hot temperatures, they're going to say, "Well, is this caused by a heat dome?" Or because
right.
that's
Or the other one is a ring of fire.
the ring of fire.
The ring
Yeah,
of fire.
but the thing is, they talked about the heat, they talked about the tropical cyclone, but they didn't mention anything about what you mentioned at the top of the show about winter storm advisories and warnings up in parts of Montana. I find that amazing that here it is. It's past the midpoint of June, and we're still talking in some areas of the country about snow. But I guess they don't want anybody to see that. They want people to think that the entire country
That
is.
the whole country's burning up. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't suit the narrative. Well, on that note, we might as well take a look at what the watches and warnings. And indeed, I mean, it's only, what is that, 5 counties or 6 counties, three in Montana, three in Idaho, that are under winter storm warnings. But I cannot remember. I mean, certainly, I mean, we've seen out of season stuff. We've seen big blizzards at the end of September in Colorado. That happened a few years ago. We've seen winter storm warnings in May, and maybe even into the early part of June in the Northern Rockies. This is about as late as I think I can remember ever seeing winter storm warnings up. And we should also point out that uh, I'm just going to go to actually, it's one, two, part of a third, part of a fourth, like 7 counties in Montana and two in Idaho. Missoula, Montana is sort of on the edge of this. But when we go to the winter storm warning, I'm just going to bring up I mean, they're talking about accumulations of 1 to 4 inches of Butte to Anaconda. and 2 to 5 from Ovando, Georgetown, Lake McDonald Pass, Homestake Pass. I don't know what the elevations are here because they're not mentioning that. 5 to 14 inches in the higher terrain. So I guess if they're giving higher amounts in the higher to for 5 to 14 in the higher terrain, so we're talking about snow maybe down in the middle part in the middle ranges, which is still pretty unusual for this time of year.
Yeah, and in fact, Vincent Croce says, "Is this late or is it an early snow?"
Well, that's no, well, it's early if they're in July, okay, because July, the snow season actually is July 1st to June 30th. Is how
Right.
they do it. Okay, so it's late for the 23-24 season. So if we get anything after July 1st, then we would say that it would be early for the winter season. But that's a good, it's a little nuance there, but we want to make sure we get it right. I love when the watches and warnings map has all the fabulous colors all over the place. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just gorgeous here. We've
Well,
got orange. We got orange with some sprayed in purple, heat advisories. There's also excessive heat watches up, but that's more for later in the week. But we got heat advisories that start tomorrow uh, for the Northeast, for the northern Mid Atlantic, for all the Ohio Valley and the lower lakes. And you'll notice that there's none up for Virginia, none up for North Carolina, for Tennessee, for South Carolina, and point southward because of where the upper high is. That's where the hottest air is going to be as you go north. And that's why you've got these advisories as far north as you do, even up to about Caribou. And we also have heat advisories in northern Indiana, western Illinois, eastern Iowa. Severe thunderstorm watches are up in north central and northeast Iowa, and southeast Minnesota, southwest Wisconsin. Flood watches up for much of Minnesota. We've also got flood watches up and down the Texas coast. From it doesn't show on the map, they are up because they put out a special weather statement for South Texas and a small area with a severe thunderstorm watch this evening. But we've got flood watches, flash flood watches up from Brownsville all the way up to the past the Louisiana state line to one of to Cameroon Parish in southwest Louisiana, Cameroon or Cameron Parish, I forget. Let me just make sure. I want to get this right. Uh, Cam Cameron, Camaron. So I guess it's Cameron Parish. As a former Louisiana resident, I should have gotten that right. So I apologize for that. And you got a variety of things in the west, from severe thunderstorm watches to winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories up to the north. We've got frost and freeze warnings up in Nevada. We've got the red flag warnings in interior of California, northern Arizona, southern New Mexico, and much of the state of Colorado. Excessive heat warnings up in south central Arizona. Heat advisories up in southwest Texas. But I, I guess the bigger deal is now the potential tropical cyclone one, which the Hurricane Center has designated this as a potential tropical cyclone. Uh, just like the Florida situation, Joe, it really doesn't matter too much. It's probably not going to really develop very much in the next few days. Maybe it gets to be a low end tropical storm if a core of convection forms. And there'll probably be an area of gales that goes far to the north because this is such a broad system. But regardless of whether this gets to be a tropical storm, the bigger story is going to be the rain for coastal and even some areas away from the coast in Texas that are going to get into some very heavy rains beginning later tomorrow and then lasting probably into the first part of Thursday.
And you see the track on the screen there, and places that are north of the storm track. Well, in a way, that's kind of like on the right-hand quadrant or the right-hand side of this tropical system. And of course, it'll be slowly growing in intensity until it makes landfall. It, of course, will never reach hurricane force, but still, just as it's making landfall, places just to the north of that storm system are probably going to have quite a bit in terms of gusty, strong winds. and also, as you pointed out, Joe, some rather heavy rain, a frictional drag as it moves out over the land, getting the moisture literally wrung out from it and causing, again, potential heavy rains, not just near and along the path, but spreading out, probably again, north of the storm track. And as you mentioned, places in Texas battening down for the possibility of some very heavy rainfall, courtesy of what could be before it makes landfall, Alberto, the first tropical storm of the season. We'll see.
Well, I got the loop up of the southwest Gulf of Mexico and a couple of things that come, to note here. And then, of course, you could see the lightning flashes because you want to look for, a core of convection over the water. And frankly, there are very few lightning strikes going on. And you'll notice it's really extended north-south. I mean, this is a very broad, non-tropical system at the moment. Question is whether we're going to see a, a, a tight, a tighter core develop as far as the center near the center is concerned, so that it would technically become a tropical system. But all of this moisture is just part of this large gyre that's sitting over Central America, and we've been talking about this last week about the fact that pressures, because of that big ridge up in the eastern part of the United States, pressures are low, below normal across much of the Gulf of Mexico and in the Northwest Caribbean. So it's out of this that we're seeing this low getting spawned. I would not be surprised, by the way, that down the road we get maybe another low that spawns in the Northwest Caribbean, Southwest Gulf of Mexico. But that's a conversation for the long range. But there's a ton of moisture here, and as the low starts to push northwestward before it turns to the west, it's really going to force a lot of this moisture to start backing westward, and you can see that it's in no big hurry. By just judging by the loop, it's moving a little bit, but it's not moving very much. But this could be, I don't know if it's going to be as bad as it was in Florida last week, but certainly we're going to see some double-digit rainfalls in some places.
Yes, well, there's no question that there's going to be a lot of rain and a little tough, when you're dealing with storm systems that are evolving, tropical cyclones that are evolving as to just how much you're going to get in any one place. But certainly, you're right, Joe. There's going to be uh, heavy amounts of rainfall. You think about it. What they saw in Florida last week really was kind of like off the wall. 15, 20, 25 inches of rain. I don't think that's going to be the case for parts of Texas, but still, 5 inches, 8 inches, 10 inches, that's certainly on the table as this system, again, winds up, develops, and continues on a trek, eventually making landfall in the next day or two over Mexico.
I'm just checking to see because they do have an Air Force reconnaissance aircraft that is on the way, but it's not quite there yet. It's still up at 27.92 north, so it won't get there for another couple of hours. So we got a ways to go before we get to see anything from this. I'm just trying to see. They're just kind of sending whatever data that they're sending in. The pressure on this is down to 1,001, by the way, uh, which is pretty low. And for some, normally when you have something with a pressure that low at this stage of the game, you probably would already have a tropical storm. But again, it's the very broad nature of this. And here's just a look at the spaghetti plots, because everybody loves to look at spaghetti plots. Um, relatively tight. They all take that left turn more westward with time. None of the hurricane models bring the track of the center now. We're talking about the center of the storm uh, into Texas. It's all on the Mexico side. But again, it's the fact that all the moisture is really going to wind up being more to the north of the center. That's the far more important thing. And then just going on a straight westward track forever. And some of them have tracks of whatever remnant low is left to come out on the Pacific side. And sometimes when they get out there, they reform. I would find it's crossing Joe at a point in Mexico that's pretty wide. So I think the mountains will shred this to pieces by the time if it were to even make it to the other side.
Right. You have to remember that these maps that we look at are strictly one dimensional. They don't show you the high terrain areas. And you're absolutely right, Joe. A weak system such as this, even though it is going to be strengthening over the next 24 hours, a weak system like this really has no chance when it's passing over the high terrain area of Mexico. It'll indeed be shredded completely apart probably before it even has a chance to exit out over, let's say, the Gulf of California, or Baja California area.
Right. We should also, the other thing is too, when it comes out the other side, it's coming out north of 25 north and it's early June. The water there, I mean, mid-June, the water there is still, it's pretty cold. So, if this were September, we might be having maybe a different conversation on that angle, but uh, it ain't going to happen now. All right. So, I'm going to bring up the Western Atlantic map here. Let's go, I'm going to bring up the upper air and why don't we let's look at the 500 millibar map, and you'll notice starting tonight, you've got that upper high is sitting over North Carolina and Virginia. And I'll just mark it off real quick so everybody can see what we're talking about here. So this is the upper high in the east at the moment. And then, of course, you've got the reflection of this very broad upper low that is in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico. And it's under this that we've got a surface low as well. And as we go through the next few days, that ridge in the north builds into the northeast and then starts to actually builds a little bit westward into the southeastern Gulf states, which forces this thing to kind of turn to the west. You can see how the flow in the Gulf goes from being southeast to northwest to almost west to east as the upper feature kind of gets squashed southward. So any surface flow out of this is going to go north northwest and then turn westward because we've got upper level winds here that are all coming from the east by the time we get to Thursday. And that's another reason why this thing probably won't make it much further north than, it probably is, outside chance the center could perhaps get as far north as Brownsville, but that seems to be a long shot, given what some of the models are showing.
Yeah, and as you pointed out, it's probably going to stay just to the south of Texas, but still close enough, as I mentioned a few moments ago, to bring portions of South Texas some gusty winds and some pretty good amounts of rain.
Right. And the gradient, because of the low, the way it is, it's down there, it's analyzed here as on the GFS anyway as uh, less than 1,002, and we saw that the Hurricane Center on their advisory has 1,001 pressure, but you can see the broad nature of this all. And because of the higher pressures that are up along the Texas coast and then through the Gulf states with the Bermuda high just kind of flexing its muscle out to the east of the Atlantic, so the gradient gets a little tight, which is why they put up gale warnings as far north as they did. They also have tropical storm watches up from Port O'Connor, which is about halfway down the Texas coast, southward to Brownsville, and the tropical storm watch continues down through the north into northeastern Mexico. The low starts to deepen a little bit into the high 990s by the time we get to Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. This is the point where the Hurricane Center thinks we could have a tropical cyclone. And then the low center on the GFS actually just sort of hangs out offshore Wednesday into Wednesday night and follow that area of heavy rain that comes in from off the Gulf of Mexico into South Texas and then starts to push westward. Holds together pretty well to San Antonio, Austin, over to Del Rio, and then eventually into Mexico as the surface low is inland and fades. And as I mentioned earlier, there's some suggestion you still have lower than normal pressures here down in Southwest Gulf, Northwest Caribbean region. So the models actually spins up another low over this coming weekend in the Southwest Gulf and kind of argues the idea that maybe they'll go through it all over again late in the weekend.
It looks like the folks down in the Gulf coastal area, from Texas eastward to Louisiana and all the way on into Florida. Well, we know Florida's already had their fair share of moisture, but it looks like this might be one of those, maybe one of those summers where the place not to be if you don't like lots of moisture or a lot of rainfall is again right along the Gulf Coast.
And the GFS model, that orange you see, that's all 10 inches plus. Coming in on the coast, like somewhere just north of Corpus Christi, gets to about San Antonio, or San Antonio is kind of on the edge, but not that far away from it, and then over to about Austin, where we've got the model indicating at over 10 inches of rain uh, forecast there. Lesser amounts as you go further to the north, so be curious to see how far. Sometimes the moisture field can fan out further north than what the models are saying, which is the reason why they've got flood watches up from Brownsville to Port Arthur. I mean, the whole Texas coast and even into the south coast of Louisiana. We're just going to have to wait and see how everything gets reflected with respect to the satellite and radars going forward. And here's what the satellite looks like after I refresh it, because I didn't refresh it since this morning. And there are some lightning strikes going on way up in western New York, Joe, and they're already fading away. So you can tell the executive producer that she shouldn't have to worry about any thunderstorms tonight. And also, you can see the cells that moved into western Pennsylvania and southeast Ohio. Still seeing some lightning strikes there, but they're starting to fade a bit. We've got some scattered thunderstorms going on in parts of Arkansas, northern Louisiana, southern Indiana, western Kentucky, southern Illinois, and then you can also see some storms flaring up across southern Minnesota and in western Montana, eastern Montana, western North Dakota, where we're seeing some lightning strikes in that particular area. The radar was down a little while ago. I'm not sure why. Well, here we go. Let's see if this is the latest. Yes, it is. So this is what we've got on the radar. And you can see these cells here have advanced to about Binghamton. They're still there, Joe. They're still lurking about. Are they going to survive the mountains?
Well, I don't know about that, but up until a little while ago, there was quite a bit of lightning activity. As you point out, the lightning seems to be fading out. I'll tell you what, if they were maybe about another 100 miles or 150 miles further east or south of where they are right now, I wouldn't be surprised if right here in the New York area, and we have basically clear skies, that if you were to look toward the northwest, you'd actually see flashes in the sky. You'd what we sometimes refer to as heat lightning, and that's merely because the atmosphere has a slight bit of moisture, or enough moisture to serve as a reflector, so to speak, and to reflect in the sky at night the flashes of lightning that are occurring many, many miles away, more than 100 miles away. So you might even be able to see, again, they're kind of diminishing now, so I don't think that's going to be the case. We're not going to be able to see anything from here in the New York area. But if they were any closer, let's say, I mean, like if you're in, I'm trying to think of a place here, somewhere, let's on Route 17 in New York State, as you're heading up, let's say, toward Oneonta. If you're in that area, you just might see, even though the skies are clear, flashes of light in the west and west northwest from that area of showers and storms. And again, it doesn't look like, you're right, it looks like they're going to peter out long before they ever have a chance to bring our area anything. So, but still kind of interesting to see that close, some significant shower and thunderstorm activity.
I'm just looking at some of the high temperatures today in parts of upstate New York. Uh, in Near Rochester, uh, Penfield got to 93. Walsworth got to 95, and I don't even know how to pronounce this. Honeoye, Honoy, whatever. 97. I'm sorry, I can't do it, folks. I tried. And I botched it up. But out to the west today in western Pennsylvania, it was in the lower 90s. In Ohio, We saw temperatures that were in the middle, and even we got 100-degree here, Joe. 100 degrees in Northwest Ohio in Toledo. Toledo Executive Airport got to 100 today, and we've got to 97 in uh, Seneca, not too far from Findlay, Ohio. So these are where the hot spots are today. Was mostly southern Michigan, southeastern Michigan, from Northwest Ohio, which saw upper 90s. So, this is why you got the heat advisories the way you do. But then you go, hey, I'm just going to head down just to show everybody. I mean, you head down into Virginia, North Carolina. Okay, you know what? It was in the upper 80s and low 90s today. That's not really, that's typical. This is what we're supposed to be. And in Georgia, let's see, up Blairsville today, 86 for a high. So I only got to, like I said, I only got to 82 because I'm away from town and I'm up another 600 feet from of elevation. So it's not particularly hot across the South. I mean, it's just seasonal.
I'm just looking here in Texas, and the Mets are going to be playing the Texas Rangers in just a very well. They're playing right now. I think the game just started, and I see that in and around Arlington, where the Rangers play, it's a temperature of around 90 degrees, and winds gusting. Well, actually, not in Arlington per se, but just south and east of Arlington, there's some gusts up to 25 and 28 miles an hour. Well, it's a hot and maybe semi-breezy night to play baseball. And I say that only because if you remember, Joe, about a week ago, the Mets were in London, and in London, the temperatures were only in the low 60s. And so they have been playing baseball in everything from low 60s to 90-degree heat. But that's baseball, I guess. And I don't even know. Does somebody know on the chat board? I know it's a new stadium that they're playing in Texas. The Rangers are playing in. Is that a dome stadium? I don't think
I
so.
have no idea. I don't know.
I
It
don't know
might
either.
be.
They,
Um,
it should be a dome stadium for all the heat and humidity that they put up with it.
this
In
is
Is
Rich Rothmansky Globe Life Stadium. Is that what it's called?
that what it is? I don't know. I still remember the old ballpark. The ballpark at Arlington is what they called it. And baseball people. They build a ballpark, and 5 or 10 years later they get tired of it, and they say, "Oh, we want a new one." It's
Right. I know. Your tax dollars too.
yes. I
All
know a
right.
lot of chat board saying yes, it has a dome. Okay, so
Okay,
that's
good.
retractable dome.
Retractable. One
So
severe thunderstorm. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Finish your thought.
that means if it's 90 or 95 outside, I would assume with the retractable dome that the temperatures are a lot cooler inside. Um, Renata and I, we went back in 2012. We went to Arizona, and we saw a baseball game at Coors, not Coors Field, at the ballpark that they have in Phoenix for the Diamondbacks. And I was all excited because I figured, well, is it the first time I'm ever going to see a baseball game indoors? But just before the game started, they opened up the roof, and so it was not. It was a regular outdoor game because it wasn't particularly hot or humid that night. But but still, it's good to have a retractable roof and air conditioning, which I'm sure the Mets will be playing in tonight with the temperatures so very very hot outside in central Texas.
The Storm Prediction Center has a severe thunderstorm watch up. Just one, actually two tonight. One in northern Iowa, southwestern Wisconsin, southeastern Minnesota, and another one on the west side of that large area of slight risk in western South Dakota, right on the South Dakota Wyoming line. So southeastern Wyoming, southeastern Montana, and northeastern Wyoming. So that's what it looks like without the boxes. And there's a area of 2 to 5% tornado risk playing out there. When we look at the radars up at the moment, these storms look like they're in their formative stages. So they probably will be dealing with severe weather during the overnight period. And you can see the storms that are already there in southeastern Minnesota moving into central Wisconsin, and the rain the valley rains and the mountain snows back through central and western Montana into Idaho and eastern Washington. And that's the cold upper low that has moved in there. So that's the Storm Prediction Center for tonight. For tomorrow, it's slight risk from Minnesota and western Wisconsin, and a narrowing slight risk band that goes down into north central Kansas. And that comes with a 2% tornado risk on the northern flank. And as we go to day three, we've got just general thunderstorms being indicated. No severe weather areas are being indicated by the Storm Prediction Center at this time. And I don't think I noticed whether they had anything in. Now, potential too low on day 4, 5, and then predictability too low on day 6, 7, and 8. And WPCs with the rainfall here. Uh, got a little bubble there, a 10 to 15 inches just north of Corpus Christi on the Texas coast, and a generous area of 5 to 7 that goes way back, way inland, and also reaches up northeastward to about Galveston, Houston, and a little bit beyond that, and just a couple of inches there along the south coast of Louisiana. So again, it's lots of moisture here. And of course, in these types of situations, as we saw what happened in Florida, you can forecast 10 and wind up with 20, depending on how it all plays out.
Yeah, with all of that moisture and all of that tropical moisture, especially, yeah, that's a good thing to do is to be just in case you double the projection for quantitative precipitation because it could very easily with one thunderstorm or one good band of convection, you could very easily get a lot more than what had been originally forecast.
By the way, you can see the impact of the broad high in the eastern part of the United States from the standpoint of precipitation, because you have a large area, southern areas of the Northeast, back to Pennsylvania and New Jersey, southward, excuse me, into the Carolinas and Georgia, almost down to the Gulf Coast, showing a tenth of an inch of liquid or less for the next 7 days. And you've got some 1.5 inch amounts plus in South Florida. But this is a fairly dry look here that we have. A little bit more in the Northeast because I guess they're looking at the next weather front, which of consequence, which probably comes late Sunday or Sunday night. Big rains up in the western lakes and in the parts of the eastern portion of the northern plains. We're looking at 1.5 inches to some cases as much as 3 to 4 inches in parts of central and northern Minnesota, and down into Iowa, southeastern Nebraska, and into north central Kansas. Hardly anything at all in the western part of the United States. So it's all about the status of this upper ridge. We might as well take a look at the upper air here. And you can see it here. This is on for Wednesday, a big closed high, probably centered right over New Jersey. And this was actually forecast by a lot of the models, Joe, to build up in upstate New York and New England. Now it's just it's not as strong and further south. The 600 decameter plus high doesn't look like it's going to get there on the GFS anyway. And after reaching its peak intensity of the strongest part of the ridge will be on Wednesday into early Thursday, and then it just starts to slowly flatten out, slowly weaken, and we got to get that. There's this flow here. You got to get them to get further south in order to get a break in the heat, and that looks like it comes Sunday. Got a pretty decent shortwave that swings out of southwest Canada and moves through the western lakes, and then swings across the northeast sometime Sunday night, Monday. That might be a trigger mechanism for thunderstorms and a cold front, and maybe could be a trigger mechanism for some severe weather.
Yeah, well, we'll certainly see on that. But the chances are, Joe, that as we progress through the week, we've got. I noticed that SPC, in fact, has the tri-state area beginning on Wednesday in general thunderstorm coverage. In fact, did I see that they even had us in general thunderstorm coverage tomorrow?
I think we're on the edge tomorrow. Let me go back. So this is day 2. Away from the coast. I mean,
yeah,
basically from, draw a line from Port Jervis uh, eastward to north of Route 84. They pretty much have it north of Route 84.
You might get the renegade pop up late day storm. Although, for the most part, if you're hoping for a thunderstorm in any one spot in the tri-state area, especially if you live near the coastal plain, don't hold your breath.
Yeah, it doesn't look like the once the ridge is gone. I mean, it does bring it back toward the first week of July, but who knows if that's correct. I saw was one run yesterday of the GFS that had a pretty deep trough in the eastern part of the United States in the longer range. It's kind of backed away from that. It was so deep that it just looked wrong. It was one of those things where you look at it and you say, not in late June.
Right. Not in this time of the year. Not the right time.
Right.
Excuse me.
All right. So, like, other than a pop up, it really isn't much to talk about here, other than the fact that we know it's going to get hot, we know it's going to get humid, and that will be the case for the rest of the week. There's a little upper trough, Joe, that comes down Thursday night, brings storms in upstate New York and in New England, just barely. By the time it reaches the coast at around midnight, it could be one of those like summertime nights where you see the lightning, but nothing ever comes of it,
Right.
from
Right.
some dying storms. So that would be about the one chance that we would have during the work week. There's some scattered stuff that pops up Friday afternoon and evening, which is possible, I suppose. And then again on Saturday, some pop ups. And then the cold front that comes in on Sunday, uh, or actually more like Sunday night. This will break the extreme heat for the first part of next week. It doesn't, there'll be a cool down, but it'll still be, I think, fairly warm behind that
More,
front.
more of a more of a dry front than a cold front or a cool
R-
front.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And by the way, everybody, the other thing to notice that there was, the models have been trying to spin up what looked like a very small system east of the Bahamas, taking it to northern Florida, then taking it to the southeast coast. Last couple of runs, you could barely find it. I mean, there's a sort of this inverted trough that is off the southeast coast on Thursday into Friday and just comes in with a small area of showers. So they still mention it in the tropical weather outlook, which I can take a look at right now. Ken Musillo just hit the tip jar. Yay, Ken Musillo. Thank
I'm gonna
you.
ring the
Thank you.
bell. It's been so long since I rang the bell. So for Ken, this is for you. There you go.
By the
It's
way, the 7 o'clock advisory was 20.5 and 93. And you can see where it is on the map. Top winds are 40 miles an hour, but it's such a broad low. It's more about the gradient than it is about anything going on near the center. Moving north northwest at 7. So 20 and a half and 93. And if we go to the tropical weather outlook, I'm sure they have the yellow. Yeah, they got the X there, but they must be in the process of updating this because they just have 10% chance in 48 hours, and they didn't write anything. There's nothing written in the box yet.
they're probably still working on it. They said, "Hey, Charlie, at least put something up there. Put a yellow
Yeah.
X up."
Look, there's nothing in the box.
Yeah.
And then they got this one in yellow, which is wrong. So they must be in the process of, I'll give it a refresh. Let's see. No, hasn't, they haven't updated that yet, but I doubt they're going to say much of anything. So, um, I think we probably covered it here. Let me just bring us back full screen. Here we are. Okay. So, shall we do a little Briller Jeopardy?
I do believe I have something from the chairman. If you'll just hold on just a moment. And I think it has something to do with heat waves. Yes. Um, actually, okay, yeah. This is continuing on the addition of retired tropical storm name systems, and tonight we have two letters of retired names, K and L. And
Okay.
for K, we only have three, and for L, we have four.
Um, I'm sorry. For K, we have three.
We have three for K and four for
Four for
L.
L.
Yes.
Well, we've got Katrina, as Vincent Croce and Maggie P are bringing up. And let's do the K's first, okay? So we don't go crazy here. So Katrina and well, we got Katrina, Kate from
Nope.
John Melander. No, not Kate.
No Kate.
Okay, but we know we've got Katrina.
Right.
Um, Patrick Darcy says Keith.
Keith, yes, from the year 2000.
Um, what about Kyle?
Kyle deserves a spot, even though it wasn't a particularly strong storm. It managed to hang around for what, almost a month?
For yeah, forever. It should be just retired because of its longevity.
I mean, I remember on one particular discussion from the Hurricane Center. I forgot who the forecaster was, but he led off with "staying alive, staying alive."
Yeah. How about Klaus
Klaus, yes, that's
von
number
Bulow?
three.
Von Bulow.
Yes, from
Um,
1990. Klaus.
so we got one left, right?
No, that was it. We only had three in K,
Oh,
and
three in K.
now we have four in the L's.
Okay, so a few of the few of the folks mentioned Lee.
Lee, memorable because it came close on the tail end of Irene and helped to contribute a lot of rain to the tri-state area. But no, Lee is not on the list.
How about Luis, as Jason Fox puts up?
Luis, 1995. I remember Renata and we went to Montauk Point. I don't know why we spent time at Montauk Point with an approaching, not it really wasn't approaching eastern Long Island, but it was churning up the waters crazy. And we actually went up into the lighthouse at Montauk and got a pretty good view of the raging tempest of the ocean. Yeah, but Luis was there. Luis in 1995.
John Melander says Larry.
Larry, no, Larry did not.
I don't
No,
remember. I don't remember a
Larry
Larry. I
didn't.
remember
And neither did Mo. Neither did Mo and
Needed
Kurt.
Bowen Curly. Exactly. Um, we're done with the K's, guys. We're
Lenny,
just on to the L's.
Patrick,
Alan Miller. I don't think there's been a Hurricane Luann.
like Luann Poovey from Global.
Yes.
No, no,
How
but
about
Patrick Darcy is correct with Lenny.
right? And Anthony brings up, there goes Lily of the valley, in the valley, way on yonder, over there.
Lily was, yes, from 2002.
Or Lily. Lily. No, there's not a Luther. Um, Laura from Vincent
Laura,
Croce.
yes, 2020. Laura.
All right, so how many we have left?
That's it.
That's it.
Got them
So,
all.
so what was
Katrina,
the L? Go
Katrina,
ahead.
Katrina, Keith, and Klaus for the K's, and Luis, Lenny, Lily, and Laura for the L's.
All right, we done good.
Yes.
All right, so let's wrap it up by telling everybody again that the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast brought to you by Tempest by Weatherflow, the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Get one and join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is on the description of this podcast. Use the coupon code Spring 2024 because if you do, you will get
10% off.
All right. Thank you, Ken Musillo, for hitting Super Chat. And we got 73 likes tonight. So a little bit more interest during this.
Nice to see numbers that high.
Yeah. I'd like to see them higher. All right. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great night. Bye bye.